Hi, welcome to the Pursuit of Truth. So I've got two things that I wanted to talk about. That's on Sky News that come after this rabble of mine. The first was about a care home. I'm not sure how many years ago it was. I assume it was in the 80s, 90s. And I believe it was the Sky investigation that uncovered it. Sandyridge. One of the people that were there talk about the abuse that happened to them and to their brother, who took an overdose years later, probably because of the abuse in many different ways. And the reason it resonated with me is it just shows you another example. I know it's an isolated example of the system not working, but also the way that we treat each other. And you think that also, not to be like anti-establishment or anything, but the way that we all, because the way we're brought up and told is that when, someone of authority says something, they're believed over, say, someone who's not in authority. You see that in court cases, when they bring up someone in a profession to talk about something, and it doesn't matter whether they're telling the truth or not, their evidence is more because they have that profession. And I know that's because of education, things like that, but that's where it can be abused, like in these cases. There's not just one, there's many of these cases where people are put in care and they're abused. And it seems, I don't understand. Like I've talked about a few weeks ago, the Southport thing. How is it possible that now 18-year-old could stab all these girls and fatally kill 3 of them? How do we get to that stage? How does a human being desensitize themselves to the fact that we're all human beings and that we're all one, and do that to another living person, even if you live within the system? And then also this abuse, you've got the Primados scandal, you've got the blood infected scandal that they just got their compensation for after years, like decades of fighting for justice. And I'm sure countless people before, when it first started, would have poo-pooed it and turned them away and said, no, people would never do experiments on people without getting their permission. And yet they're paying now for the fact that that did happen to people, children, that they did experiments on them, testing, I assume, drugs that weren't tested, or I don't know exactly what the experiments were, but that's what they're being paid for, some of them now. You wouldn't, if someone told you that, on social media said that these things are happening, you say, oh, they're conspiracy theorists, they're talking rubbish, these things don't happen, because that's our natural instinct, is we can't believe that people in authority will do these things because we put that trust in. But unfortunately, the more and more we find that it is possible. Not as likely, but it is possible. And people that are, that want to abuse power, this is their way of being able to do it. And it's just shocking to see that this is just another example of human depravity that humans don't see. I just don't understand it. Like, especially when it's a child. This lady who's just going to talk, she was 2 years old when she was put into care. And, she didn't know what's normal and what's not, because she's only 2 years old. And she grew up until she was 14 or 15, realising that, well, this isn't normal, this is not happening to everyone. And imagine how compliant you may be because you thought it was normal. And you think it's your fault because you accepted things, but it wasn't, because you just didn't know what was right and wrong. That's the world we live in. And that's not just something that's happened in the 70s, 80s or 90s. I suspect, I'm almost certain, that's still happening now. There are still people abusing people, aren't there? And there's still people using their position and their power, their money and their status to do the things that they want to do, and getting away with it, like these people did at Sandyridge. And it's only coming out, I believe, because of a Sky investigation. I mean, I believe the council have been paying them redress, but there was a social worker that was involved that was covering it up. How is it possible, you think, that these things can happen? But that's the circle. Once you're in the circle, and we've seen that like with Jimmy Savile and with all other these different cases, where if you're within the circle, you can do those things and get away with those things that ordinary people wouldn't. And people turn more of a blind eye because you're in that circle. But that's the danger of the circle. But I suppose the thing is, like, you're always going to get, well, I don't know about always, in the system that we live within, we're always going to get the element of people who are these bad people that do these things. And that happens in different scales. That happens in governments, with people backhand envelopes and money and giving positions to their friends and family, and all those kinds of deals that benefit them, and not really thinking about what the system is meant, that they're meant to look for all of us. But that's why I think the system doesn't work. But this is just another example of that. And then the next story is about the riots and these two gentlemen who actually, strangely, I suppose they picked this guy, did that on purpose. They both look quite similar. They both got beards. They're both the same kind of build. They, you would think they were brothers when you looked at them, and I expect they did that on purpose. But that's a good, it shows that. And they just talk about one organised a riot in Hull, or not a riot, sorry, a protest that turned into a riot. And the other is someone who came from Iraq who was, felt fear from it. And just to hear them talking with each other about this incident I thought was quite interesting, and highlights, I guess, the dangers of sometimes words and gatherings and etc. But of course this plays into the government, wanting to, like some people have suggested, that this is like a way for them to bring more draconian laws in that affect all of us rather than just those particular people that want to do these things. But that buys into that. But as usual, the people that are getting angry at the wrong thing. They're getting angry at people rather than the system that creates us, and also the system that blinds us. Not, these people, I should say, that believe that, like he says at one point, black, brown, white, unite type thing. But then again, he doesn't like immigrants, in his words, coming in and having a free ride, as it were, in their big hotel, 4-star hotels, and the fact that he doesn't see we're all human beings, and that's the problem. That's the missing link. That's where the problem starts. Because once you see that we're all the same, why wouldn't you want someone to have a better life? Why would you want someone to live in a war-torn country? Why would you be jealous of someone having a place to stay or food to eat and etc. when you see that we're all brothers and sisters of each other? So that's where's that seed come from that you see us as separated? The system, history, people thousands of years ago who divided us all up and told you must be patriotic to this ideology, this culture, this society, and not humanity, which is what is intrinsically the truth, that we're all connected by that. The rest is just playtime. But anyway, they were quite interesting, these discussions. I'll put them on now for you. Right. Take care, easy, God bless, and peace.
To our top story now, a document made public for the first time reveals how several people reported abuse at a children's home in Kent. The safeguarding failings at site in Sandyridge, which has long since closed down, was under the care of Dennis and Anne May, who've both since died. A senior social worker who's also died allegedly ignored pleas for help, and no one has ever been charged. I'm joined now by Amanda. You'll have seen in Alice Porter's report a bit earlier on. Amanda was sent to Sandyridge back in 1979, along with her siblings. And just a warning that you might find some of what Amanda is most likely to say quite distressing about the abuse. Amanda, good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us to talk about this.
Thank you.
And of course, we have to say those kind of things because what you experienced was horrendous. But in some ways, what's more horrendous is it became your normal, didn't it?
It did indeed. When you're taken into care at such a young age and you're placed in 2 Lambeth-run children's homes and also a children's home that was contracted by Lambeth and just systematically, physically, emotionally and sexually abused from such a young age, it does become normal. You know, you kind of don't figure out until you get to a certain age that, hold on a minute, what is happening to me isn't right, because none of my school friends or anything are going through this. So why is it happening to me? So it's wrong. Obviously, you know, we had myself and my older sibling Jenny. We had a younger brother Jason who was barbarically abused, and later on in life, his abuse really affected his mental health, and we sadly lost Jason in 2009. He was a massive part of our life. We, even today, miss him dearly.
I know he was 35 when he died, and it was an accidental overdose, but what prompted him to seek solace in substances was the abuse he'd suffered, was the abuse you'd all suffered as children.
Yeah. Jason was systematically abused by Dennis May. You could hear, like when he went upstairs, he was dragged upstairs by the back of his jumper. You could hear the screams. They were horrendous. And, you know, being placed somewhere when you're a child, when you're, you know, put in the care system, you're supposed to be safe.
Yeah.
You're supposed to feel safe. We never had that.
Amanda, how old were you when you were put into care?
2.
2.
Yeah.
So look, you were too young to be conscious of what was going on.
Absolutely.
How old were you when you realised that this was meant to be a safe place, but it wasn't?
Probably when I was about 14, 15.
So you'd gone through all those years of abuse, thinking this is just what happens. And only when you're a teenager, you realise that this was wrong.
What fucking bastards, those people.
And this didn't just happen to you and your siblings. This happened to lots of kids at this care home.
It happened. The abuse happened on a daily basis, whether it was sexual, physical, emotional, racial abuse. It happened on a daily basis. You know, I wish I had all night to talk to you because there's so much. You know, when you're seeing, you know, children having jugs of hot custard poured over their head because where they've, you know, cooked custard and they've slightly burnt it. When you're seeing children being slapped across the face, or, you know, having a slipper thrown up the stairs, having their hair pulled, being degraded in front of everyone.
I agree with you, Amanda. I mean, the short amount of time we can talk about this can't fully do it justice. We really appreciate you talking about it, though. I'd imagine it's something you've wanted to come out into the open for a long time.
Absolutely. And I think it's really important because I feel that, you know, even today with children in care, you know, there's a great awareness around abuse. And, you know, if our story helps other people come forward about their abuse so they can get the help and the support that they require, then, you know, even if it's just 1, 100, 1,000 people, then, you know, we've done our job. And, you know, if we can, with our stories, change the system to help other people, then we've done our job. And this is what it's all about. You know, it's about raising the awareness and getting the justice and the apology that we deserve, because we've been failed massively.
It certainly sounds that way, especially as Dennis and Anne May are no longer around. They died, and the police had been looking at this, but seemingly were slow to do something about it. The same with the social worker who was part of a wider ring of abuse that meant you and your siblings ended up being in the care of Dennis and Anne May. Look, I have to ask Amanda, after all this time, obviously you're an adult now, you're in middle age, a lot of people hear what you've had to say about your childhood and wonder how you've even coped with it. Do you come to terms with it? How do you cope when you think about your childhood?
I think it's about accepting what has happened. You can't change the past. And, you know, if we can try and turn all this negativity into something positive where other people can come forward, then it's a good thing. But it is a lot about accepting what has happened, moving on, and being the best person we can be, and to support everyone else who has been through what we have been through and what we've experienced.
Well, Amanda, we're so grateful you've taken the time to talk to us so honestly and openly. I think a lot of people will say bravely as well. Really, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Some of the toughest sentences yet have been handed down for participation in the riots which spread across much of the country at the beginning of the month. Jail terms in excess of 4 years in some cases. But here we are, a fortnight on, and divisions are still being felt. Our communities correspondent, Becky Johnson, has been back to Hull, which saw some of the worst violence, to bring two sides together in a frank and face-to-face discussion.
This is Amanj Jamil. He's lived and worked here in Hull for 24 years, since arriving as an asylum seeker from Iraq. We've invited him to meet the man who organised the demo that led to racist violence in the city earlier this month.
You must be John.
Yeah, hello. You Amanj?
I am, sir.
Yeah, how are you, sir?
How are you doing?
Right.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I was in the mosque on that day.
Police tried to hold back a mob as they hurled things towards the mosque where Amanj worships. People inside were injured as rocks were thrown.
I'm really sorry for what happened to you and to your community within that mosque. What happened was my vigil and my protest got hijacked.
Hijack.
I didn't.
You didn't know that's going to happen. But at the end of the day, you organised it.
I didn't organise. What I organised was I organised the peaceful protest.
The peaceful protest.
John moved to Hull years ago from London. He's worked with stroke survivors after having strokes himself.
But if you're going to come to this country and try and impose and demand...
This was him in a Stop the Boats t-shirt leading the rally that day.
Pillage and kill. No one. I don't want you here.
There were teddies and flowers on the flag. People had been asked to bring them in memory of the 3 girls killed in Southport.
The situation started because of the Southport, or we just had enough of the...
It wasn't actually because of that. I think...
Because of the Southport?
No, I'd actually...
What happened to the kids in Southport?
No, it wasn't just about that. Basically, what happened was I've actually been protesting against the state of the country.
Yes.
For quite a while now. And
not knowing that diversity built the country.
Yeah. And illegal immigration is is probably my main focus at the moment.
Yeah.
So I had a protest planned for about 3 weeks, but then what happened in Southport, we decided to use the opportunity to turn it into a vigil to remember the young girls.
There you go.
And now I know that.
But you didn't know that guy, he was born and bred in the UK.
I never jumped on any of that.
As the protests that day turned violent, a large crowd made their way to a migrant hotel in Hull city centre. Riot police attempted to protect it, but they too were attacked before hotel windows were smashed.
What's the issue with the asylum seekers and refugees coming there?
Let me tell you.
Yeah.
Let me explain to you.
Okay.
Because the way I see it, right. So from the outside looking in, this is what people are seeing. This is what people are being told.
Yes.
They're being told they're taking up the 4-star hotels. They're being rewarded. they're being housed, they're being fed, they're being clothed, they've got no council tax to pay, nothing, and they're being given pocket money. And they're not vetted. They're not vetted. Nobody knows who they are. And they're being allowed to walk around in city centres amongst children, amongst women, and nobody knows who these people are. I welcome people. I remember in 2000 when I think you was one of them, when all the Iraqis came over.
I didn't have a good time back then.
But what they've done wrong is they put them in an already deprived, underprivileged area. I think there was about 2,000 young men. You would have probably been one of them. And what that done is that actually created a resentment among local people, because they're already struggling in their lives and all that, and all of a sudden they got these 2,000 people coming into that one condition. And I don't think, I don't think the government, and I don't think the council really ever made an effort to integrate people. We don't know each other.
We don't.
Our communities don't mix with your communities. Your communities don't mix with our.
We do mix. Well, but I've got so many English friends. I can imagine. Before I have a business down Springbank. Yeah. I was working in NHS. Yeah. So my main friends and best friends, and they were all doctors, nurses.
That's going to go in a minute.
Not far from where Amanj lives, tyres were set on fire as the riot spread and cars were set alight before the mob made their way to the mosque. This is a post that was circulated ahead of the demo, including a whole list of things that John and his supporters say they're fed up with, something I was keen to ask him about. In an advert that was on social media for the protest, it also talked about terror attacks by an alien religion. Are you talking about Islam?
Yeah, what I can do is, I've got it on my phone.
Were you talking about Islam?
Yeah. Yeah, well,
so when you put things like that, are you surprised when people go and attack a mosque?
No, I am.
Well, that's trigger the violence, isn't it?
Sorry, you're bogging me down there.
Against the backdrop of everything that was going on that weekend, we'd already seen some rioting. Did you really think that protest wasn't going to turn violent?
When I first organised it, I didn't think it'd turn violent, okay? But during the week, I started getting vibes, and then a police liaison officer rang me and said, "John," he said, "what do you think?" And I said, "Well, I think the vibe I'm getting off the street, there's going to be a lot of people there." And he rang me the next day and he said, "Is there any chance of your counselling it?" And I said, "To be honest with you, if I cancel it, people are still going to turn up anyway. It's out of my hands now. There's people I don't even know."
Do you wish you had cancelled it now?
No, because I don't think my vigil caused it.
You can tell by the view of the crowd, it's going to happen.
Yeah, so but I weren't expecting all of that.
The organisers of demos that took place around the country and their ideology are now being scrutinised. John accepts he has a history of association with the now defunct English Defence League. Would you describe yourself as far right?
No, not at all.
But you were a member of the EDL?
Yes, I was a member of the EDL.
He says he left the group well before it disbanded, but has since formed another organisation. You do run the Hull Patriotic Protesters group?
Yes, I do, yes.
And that group says it's there to protest against the influx of illegal invaders. Is that not the language of the far right?
I think, on reflection, right, because when I set that group up, there was a lot of stuff coming out from Parliament about an invasion, right? I forget the politicians that were saying it, but everyone was calling it an invasion. On reflection now, I don't think it's the best choice of words.
So you can see why somebody coming to one of your Hull Patriotic Protesters demonstrations might think this is a far-right group.
Yeah, I think I need to change that. But you need to be fair as well, Becky. You need to be fair, because every single one of my posts, I always say black, brown and white unite. Yeah. I don't like racists. I don't like Nazis. I don't want violence. I don't want riots. I always say that.
The message you put in, it kind of trigger things for other people. You might have, in your opinion, that's what we're going to do at a peaceful demonstration. But other people who's understanding the message, I understand the message clearly, says, let's go attack them.
For Amanj and his family, the impact of what happened that day has been lasting.
At the moment, I still feel uncomfortable going to town. going to shopping centres, going to public places, you know what I mean? It's not easy to cover that with a blink of the eye. It's like everything's back to normal.
This is a city with huge issues with deprivation. Can you understand why some people feel frustrated when they see asylum seekers living in hotels, as John might put it, getting a free ride?
They don't get free ride for long. The way they live in, you can just go to the hotel, the food and the place has been provided is not the way you think it's been heaven in there, and I could live there forever. Believe me, they are struggling. I can understand their anger for more people, for more asylum seekers and refugees coming to the country. It's all going back to the government. But it is a lack of accommodation in here for all of us, really. There's no houses.
And have you got any more protests planned?
No, I don't really think this city needs that at the moment. I just think the people of this city need a rest. I think the people of this country need a rest. I think the Prime Minister of this country, he needs to think about how he's addressing people and he needs to not just put out the fire. He needs to find out why the fire started.
On that, these two men agree, despite the very different outlooks they have. At the end, they exchanged numbers, each respecting the other for taking the time to talk. Becky Johnson, Sky News, Hull.